I'm Janine, and this is Outside the Box. Standing by to join me is Elaine Miller-Karas, and she has been called an ambassador of hope and a resilience guru. She's an author, a social worker, a trauma therapist, a radio talk show host, a co-founder of an international organization called the Trauma Resource Institute, Inc., and a key developer of the community and trauma resiliency models. Her work has been featured in the LA Times, Forbes, and Psychology Today. And I have a whole bunch of other information on the show blog, which is otbseries.com. And shout out to Dr. Brian Robinson for introducing us.
Thank you, Brian.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you.
I want to back up for a little bit and I want you to share how you got to where you are now. I know that's probably a long story, but just
a long story.
Your pivots, like how you
some highlights.
Highlights, the highlight reel.
Okay, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and in 1992, my husband and I moved from the Bay Area to Southern California. And I was very fortunate to get a job as a teacher of family medicine at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, which is a large county hospital in Southern California. And being a teacher of family medicine, I had these wonderful young physicians who had a lot of book knowledge. Some of them had more lived experience than others, but my job was to teach them the behavioral sciences. And the way that our program was set up is I would co-attend with the medical faculty. So the young doctor would go in to visit a patient, and they might come out and say, Mrs. So-and-so, X amount of years old, presents with insomnia, and plan is Ambien, a medication that might help with sleeping. And then my job was to say, I wonder what might be causing her insomnia. And I said, so one of the things that can also cause insomnia is depression. Mm-hmm. And so I would have them go back in. I said, find out what's happening in her life. And then I would give them the very simple ways that we can assess for depression and other kinds of mental health conditions. And invariably they'd come back and go, oh my gosh, there was a drive-by, her son's has been sent off.
Her dog died, or, who knows?
Could have been any of the windstorms of life that have impacted us all. But what became clear as I worked in family medicine is so many times when the patients came in, they came in with physical symptoms that were not related to, let's say, a brain tumor or even a chronic mental health condition. Medical condition, but it was related to something that was happening in their life that was impacting their body that actually had to do with trauma. And around that time, well, a little bit later, but around that time, also the article came out in one of the medical journals about the adverse childhood experiences study.
Oh,
this is it. I've always known this to be true, but now we have evidence that traumas that we experience as children can also lead to all the plethora of different medical health problems.
Yeah, physiological too.
Physiological
stomach aches,
including shortening our life by 20 years if we have 6 or more adverse childhood experiences compared to those who had 0. And I thought, so this kind of was stirring up the information inside of me. Yes. And then I started looking at people who were doing research in the field about the connection between other physiological traumas and mental health conditions. And I ran across Pat Ogden, Judith Herman, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, and there was a number of people in the mental health field that were really, again, you're thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
They were saying we have to look at how the body impacts the mind, and that we actually need to look at trauma and survival. And this was corresponding to what I was learning in family medicine. So I actually became trained in one of the models, and it was really very illuminating, but it was also very expensive. It also took 3 years. And I was working in an area, I knew a lot of the social workers in San Bernardino County, but to pay the amount of money, I just was able to do that thankfully to the chairman of our department, who gave the same amount of money to social workers as she gave to the medical professionals, who and their conferences were a lot more expensive than the social workers.
Yeah.
But I thought, how could we, make a more accessible, affordable, transportable, adaptable model that could be learned a little bit easier than 3 years, and
Yes.
that could have the components of how the body affects the mind. And I had a lot of ideas of all the other different things I'd done in my life. And I'm going to have to mention one because people are
Please.
often surprised to hear this in terms of the pivots. Is early in my life, before I became a social worker, I was a Lamaze teacher, a childbirth educator,
Oh.
and I was a doula. Now, how does that connect to what I'm doing now? Is I learned that the body had natural rhythms when women gave birth. And
Mhm.
I learned that you could be a gentle guide, and this wasn't about having no medication. This was about helping a person through what is one of the most arduous experiences physically that any woman can go through, and also family. And
Right.
so when I did that, I learned that you could guide people gently in supportive, connected ways, and that it could help them to, no matter if they had medication or not, or if they've had a cesarean birth, but it
Mhm.
supported this person during what was a difficult time, and
Yes.
also supported her and her family afterwards. And so when I'm
Beautiful.
starting to think about the creation of what has become now the community resiliency model and the trauma resiliency model, I had the good fortune to meet a woman named Jeannie Everett. She lives between Maine and Albuquerque, New Mexico, but she was like-minded in some of my thinking. And so she and I first got together and had a synergy of, oh, yeah, there could be a short-term model, but we were thinking more like disaster trauma in the beginning, because we had gone to Thailand together after the tsunami of 2004. But in any event, what ended up happening is that I ended up writing most of what was first called trauma first aid. But then when we started doing teachings and workshops, people would say, oh, well, this is helping me in my childhood trauma. This is helping me in the here and now,
Great.
or whatever I'm experiencing. It doesn't have to be quote unquote disasters. So
Yes.
she ended up leaving and doing something differently. And another person came and worked with me, and she stayed for a while. She certainly imbued it with some ideas, but it was kind of what ended up happening. It was kind of mine to carry forward. So I kind of named myself as the key developer, even though there were other people that, of course, were involved in
Sure.
the inceptions of it. And I always give such homage to Jeannie and the work that we did together when we were conceptualizing this.
Incredible. I
Yeah, because
love how it was applicable to so many people's lives, and now look at what you created and how relevant it is to, the mental health pandemic that we're in.
well, and I think that's the exciting part, is that I had no idea when I first started this that it would be so applicable to so many different ways. But one of the ideas that we had when we were first starting is in San Bernardino County. I knew a woman named Marianne Ruffalo, and she was in charge of their workforce training program. And I had just come back from Haiti when we were first conceptualizing the model. And she said, "Well, Elaine, couldn't you do in San Bernardino County for, we have a lot of people that, don't believe in mental health, or don't have accessibility, or they've been marginalized for a lot of different reasons."
Mhm.
And I have sitting on my desk an RFP, a request for a proposal for innovations through the California Mental Health Services Act. So I always credit Marianne for saying, take a look at this. And I'm going, oh my gosh. So we ended up writing this. And it was really the hardest thing that I have ever done, because we did get awarded this. And so for
Wow.
3 years, from 2010 to 2013, we piloted the community resiliency model amongst many of the citizens of San Bernardino County. And this was, and the state of California gave us this pocket of people to bring the
Oh, that's
material.
perfect.
Yeah, so it was African Americans, Latinos, gay, lesbian, transgender,
Mhm.
LGBTQAI. We didn't have
Yes.
the AI back then, but it's been added.
Okay.
Um, uh, Native Americans, at-risk youth, veterans. So you're seeing Asian Pacific Islanders. So and so I went into the community literally, and I like knocked on doors and said, "We have this model. Would your community like to do this?" And so after lots of knocking on doors, we were able to get a group of people from most every pocket, in order to do a community resiliency model teacher training program. So that was our launch. And we did some preliminary research, which is more like a survey. We could have done it better, but we've learned a lot since then.
All right.
The results of the survey was that there was statistically significant reductions in depression, anxiety, hostility indicators, and somatic symptoms, and an increase in well-being. And so then we're going, I knew that it would work with anxiety. I didn't know it would work for depression in the same way. So it was like the beginning point of like, kind of like that amen, hallelujah moment that,
Yes.
my gosh, what I've been doing and working has some evidence now.
Yes. We're on the right track. We're making an
We're
impact.
on the right track. Let's take it to the next step. And so then we started to do workshops. And then what became clear to me is I was in other countries bringing this. I've been to Nepal, I've been to Haiti, I've been to Tanzania, I've been to Kenya, I've been to Ireland, I've been to the UK, I've been to China, I've been to so many different places around the Philippines. I've been to so many different.
And it's all implementing this.
Implementing these in workshops, and many of it was after disaster.
Okay.
It became clear to me is, many countries do not have therapists. They have what I now call natural leaders. And these natural leaders are people that are respected, are trusted. They already care for their communities very dearly. And oftentimes, if there's a crisis, people are knocking at their door going, oh, senora or madam, this or that, can you help us? So what if we gave the natural leaders skills that they could then not only use for themselves, but share with their community? They already have natural skills that they're using for their community. But what if we did that? Because our model is based, it's based on cutting edge neuroscience.
Yes.
It's a
yes.
very simple skills that even children can learn. And so then I said, well, I can do that in other countries. Really, Marianne Ruffalo's, we could do it here too.
Yes.
There is not enough therapists in the United States, especially now,
right,
to deal with.
There's a huge shortage, and they've left the profession.
They would also, the COVID-19, the social upheaval, the political unrest, the polarization that we're experiencing in our country. So many people are struggling with mental health conditions. And even when you see, I watched the January 6th hearings and hearing some of the people, one of the men said, well, I was really in a bad place in my life. And I realized I started listening to social media, and it's like it got in there. And then I started believing it. I think that sometimes people that do violent acts because of their undiagnosed mental health condition.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And they've had trauma.
Yes.
And they have undigested trauma that then gets, unfortunately, acted out in behavioral ways that causes not only damage to them, their families, and their communities.
Well, it's interesting you say this, because there's a chapter in the book I'm writing. The book is called Better Humans: What the Mental Health Pandemic Teaches Us About Humanity. And just yesterday, I was writing some statements about how I believe that people should take a closer look at the shooters, because they typically seem to be white, young, male, who have a background of abuse, and they're, no one knows until after the fact. And I really believe strongly that there needs to be initiatives in schools for people to speak up and say something if they see something. And also social media has a responsibility. I don't think people should be posting pictures of their guns. I think there should be red flags, and there needs to be some, new guidelines for using social media.
Well, wouldn't that be something? Because social media is running amok right now.
Yes.
It's like what to believe. And I think that we have to look at that as a society, because I think if we don't, then there's the proliferation of untruths that we're seeing. And how do you believe what's true? What do you know is true or not true? And so it used to be, when I was a kid growing up, there was Walter Cronkite. He was like the most respected news person. If Walter Cronkite said it, it must be true. I don't think we have that same respect in the media. I think it's different in what's about.
Yes.
There goes the dog.
Wow, that's a very interesting phone alarm.
Yes, isn't that a phone alarm that is there for us?
It's you're making me think of an analogy. It's like if I say I'm going away and you're my kids, and you throw a party, right? And social media is like that party where there's no parents, and there's nobody monitoring anything, and there's a keg, and there's crazy behavior, and there's this and that and whatever. In your opinion, because we talked about, the mental health pandemic that we're in, and there are so many factors that I believe fueling that. how do you think we can move forward in a positive direction? I mean, you're doing different initiatives with mental health and wellness, and it's very interesting. Before you answer my question, I started thinking earlier how in other countries, the answer is not necessarily take this pill, whereas, and it's interesting long term to do a study about how effective, because you're giving them long term skills. In our country, it's try these behavioral things, right? But take this pill.
Yeah.
I believe your method provides long-term resilience and personal satisfaction. I think there's so many benefits.
Well, of course, you're talking to the choir here. So first of all, let me say, I'm not opposed to medication. Being
Right.
a mental health provider, there are some people that I know that medication makes a huge difference. People
Yes.
with schizophrenia, sometimes people with conditions like bipolar,
Oh,
that mood
completely.
stabilizers can be very helpful. But then
Yes.
on top of that, that doesn't mean that life doesn't happen to you if you've been diagnosed with schizophrenia or
Right.
bipolar condition. And then other people that us others that have the kind of the bread and butter kinds of things, anxiety and depression, that happen to most of us during parts of our life. I mean, there's different degrees of it, of course,
Yes.
but I think that what our community resiliency model does, and our trauma resiliency model does, and I think other somatic based models, I think the centerpiece of it is something called interoceptive awareness. And
Okay.
that's our ability to pay attention to the sensations within our body. And so what I've learned, and the most important thing I've learned, I think, about all the things I've learned in my life, is that when we learn how to pay attention to the sensations connected to our distress and our well-being, and we can tell the difference between the two, we then have a choice. Even if we've had tons of trauma, we have a choice of what to pay attention to. So if something's happening and I have, a pit in my stomach because I'm experiencing some distress because of something that's happened, I can also start thinking about, is there a place in my body that feels better than my stomach? And that's a very simple thing, right? I go, oh, well, my toes feel better. And maybe I wiggle my toes and all of a sudden I feel my stomach release. And
Mm-hmm.
when that happens, I take a deeper breath, a parasympathetic breath, and I can feel a greater sense of calm. And then it's almost like a fog lifts from my prefrontal cortex. And I can say, well, I think that solution to that problem that caused that tightness in my belly may be that I need to talk to my husband about, he needs to take the garbage out every day. I'm using something very
Of
simple,
course. Yes.
right? But it could be bigger than that.
Yes.
And when we do that, you see, we're cultivating our well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing it during the activities of daily living. I can very simply talk, let's say we were talking about something and it disturbed me. You wouldn't even know that I was bringing my attention to another part of my body that was feeling less distress. And I could feel my body relaxing and opening up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we do with the models, is that we help people learn about their own nervous system so that they can pay attention to that. And I've really come to believe that every thought, every feeling, every belief has a corresponding sensation in the body. And I've believed that for a long time. And now we have researchers that are actually mapping people's experiences of where they're noticing activation in their body when they see images that cause different kinds of emotions. So
Wow,
it's not
that's fascinating.
not only what I've seen clinically or that I've done the experience of, we have people doing that research and doing that work. But the exciting part, especially, I know that you're interested in, what's happened to us since COVID-19,
Mm-hmm.
is that there's a group of researchers. We have now, way back when we had one person who created the research for that first study, we have a research committee in the Trauma Resource Institute made up of about 100 people from different academic institutions from around the world now. And they are doing research on the model and its effectiveness in different ways. So like we have a young man in Rwanda that's working with genocide survivors coming out of prison and showing the value of them learning, like you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
these skills to help them.
Yes.
And they may not have any pills available, but they have the resource of their own body and
Yes.
learning. As one participant in one of our workshops said, well, my body was talking to me my whole life. I never knew how to talk back.
Mm.
So we are giving
Yes.
skills that children can use, that adults can use to be able to do that. And the researchers, especially if there's a group of researchers at Emory University, and they're some of them are psychiatric nurse practitioners, and some of them are just have their doctorate in just a doctorate.
Just a doctorate. Wait a minute, I have just my doctorate.
But have their doctorate in something in education. But in any event, they're doing research on the effectiveness of the community resiliency model with nurses. And they're looking at dosage. How much community resiliency model skills do you need in order to make an impact? So their first study was just a 3-hour workshop where they were taught the basic skills and concepts. And what they found after a year, the nurses, and this is what goes to, what the comment you made, I think at 6 months, there was a 60% improvement in the well-being of the nurses. At 1 year, there was an 80% improvement in well-being. So what does that say? It means they were practicing the skills.
Yes.
And as they practice it, their well-being amplified, continued.
Yes.
And about a third of the nurses in the study could meet the diagnosis of PTSD. And that was before the pandemic. But since the pandemic, there's a researcher named Dr. Ingrid Duva, and she's just had an article published in the Journal of Public Health. And then I just got an email from her this morning that she just found out that her study about looking at the effects of the community resiliency model after only 1 hour of training and it having an effect. So, I mean, we need to look more. Naturally, it'd be nice to have more than 1 hour, but we're also looking at the massive amount of stress that nurses and healthcare providers have experienced during COVID-19.
Terrific.
Something that has a short dosage, that the impact, the scalability of that is, to me, unbelievable.
Right.
And so that's the kind of research that's being done. And that's with healthcare workers with COVID-19. The other thing that recently happened is that there was it's called a HRSA grant, but it was looking at our workforce and trying to bring greater well-being resiliency to our workforce throughout the United States. And I think they gave, I'm not sure exactly how many, I think there were 12 or so grants they gave that were multi-million-dollar grants. They're 3-year studies. Well, 4 of the ones they gave out, University of New Mexico, University of Alabama, Emory University in Atlanta, and Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, they are using the community resiliency model as part of their offering, and they're doing research on it. So we are incredibly excited to think that the model is now going to be brought to, and this is directly, of course, because of COVID, and we're going to have more research about it.
Right.
This kind of, sometimes I feel like I'm a used car salesman. You got to learn about the community resiliency model. But, that used car salesman is now saying, oh, wait a second, we got the research behind us now. Now, they're testing out the brakes and they're testing out the accelerator, and it seems like it's working pretty well. So
amazing.
We've got a lot of hope. And I think that's the other thing that happens is I have heard people express hope in ways that I didn't know were possible, because these skills are so simple, like even a child can learn them, but there's something that happens because of that awareness, that body awareness, when people who felt so much tension in their life, all of a sudden feel that deeper breath in their body, they can feel their muscles relax, that may come up from just thinking about a pleasant memory, that, something that was meaningful for them about their life. And then they notice the sensations connected to that. And they have this, sometimes tears come and go, oh, I haven't thought about that moment with my grandmother since I was 10.
Wow.
But remembering that day that we made lemonade together. And I remember how much she loved me. And all of a sudden you see this grown person who had looked so tense, the stress melts away. And I think it really is the sensation piece, because we can call back memories. Oh yeah, that's right. My grandma and I used to make lemonade. But if we pause and say, oh, as you're remembering that, tell me about how you made the lemonade. Oh, we had one of those old glass juicers, and I remembered she'd cut the lemons in half. She'd give it to me, and I'd get that juice on my fingertips, right? So you expand the detail of the memory. And then if you're to ask me, Elaine, what do you notice on the inside? This is my grandmother, by the way. Right? I can just feel her with me, even though she died many years ago.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's how we're designed as human beings.
Yes.
We're not only designed to remember the traumas in our life, but we're also designed to cultivate our well-being. But I think that the trauma is such a beating drum. I believe that we are really designed to survival. So of course, if something happened to us and there's a certain smell associated with it, for example, and it's 10 years later and we smell that smell, all of a sudden our heartbeat starts beating faster and we want to leave wherever we are.
Yes.
What is that's
Yes.
just your body saying something really bad happened to you and this reminds me of it, so you might need to run away. But that can make us feel a little crazy when that happens,
Of
because
course.
we're at the grocery store and we're just about ready to check out, but the guy behind us has Old Spice cologne that our perpetrator wore when we were abused.
Ugh,
See?
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we know now, smells can elicit
Oh,
a
absolutely.
survival response. And if I smell Old Spice, I don't have to be swept away by it. I can stop and I can sense myself in the present moment. I
Right.
can even think about, lavender. Oh, that smell of lemons. All of a sudden my nervous system settles and I'm not so activated. I can stay and pay for my groceries and leave the store and
Yes.
not leave my groceries there and say, I'm sorry, I got to leave.
Right.
You see how trauma
You can
derails.
shift it. Yeah.
Yes, you can shift it. And one of our skills is called shift and stay. Shift from the distress to the well-being and stay with it.
That's
So
amazing.
I know it's very simple.
So you're basically in a lot of different areas. Well, you're different parts of the world. And so you're in healthcare, right? You're in schools. Where else are you?
Oh my gosh, there's so many
Everywhere.
places. I mean, this is what the thing is, because people come to our trainings, right? I don't necessarily know who signs up for our public trainings, but they could be from a variety of different areas. Like there's a training going on right now that I just kind of said hello to. I was there with them for a little while. There were people from the Covenant House, and that's a homeless shelter.
Yes.
And
Beautiful.
the Covenant House, I know in Atlanta, has used it, but this was from a Covenant House in Santa Clara County. There's a person in Atlanta who's created this idea called Bridges to Therapy, because in Georgia, they don't have great accessibility for people who don't have money to mental health services. So she found that if she would teach people the community resiliency model skills until a mental health therapist was available, that could keep them coming back to their program.
That's amazing.
Until a therapist. So it's called Bridges to Therapy. And she got a grant from the state of Georgia. And her name is Dr. Jordan Murphy, and she's doing research on it.
That's great.
So isn't that great? But I think the one that really kind of blew my socks off, there's a woman named Sarika, and she's in South Africa. I was in South Africa a few years ago, and she came to our training, and she sent me an email a few years back, and she goes, Elaine, I just want you to know that, one of the traumatized folks are our game wardens who are trying to protect the large animals of our planet. And when an animal gets poached, that it's really very traumatic for them. And she said, so I went in and I taught them the CRIM skills. And I thought, oh my gosh, to think that the CRIM skills are being taught to the game wardens in a large national park in South Africa. I have to tell you, I had tears in my eyes.
That is beautiful.
There are many things that are precious in this life, but I think our large animals are very precious, and to keep and what they have to do to protect them must be a very difficult job. And when they get poached, I can't even imagine, the traumas that they feel, if that's their purpose and their meaning, right? So, but we also, there's another project that I'm just so proud of. And this is a person named Jennifer Wallace. It was kind of like her brainchild. But she was charged by the state of Washington. They passed a law a few years back that said every sexual assault interview in the state that's done by law enforcement needs to be trauma informed. So she had just taken one of our trainings. And so she contacted us and she said, well, I'm just wondering, maybe the community resiliency model can be what we use to train the law officers and the advocates and other people that are working.
That is good. Yeah.
And so she, with a number of her colleagues, have created these sexual assault interviews. And the whole purpose, and I just love this purpose, is to not re-traumatize the victims.
Yes.
And so basically, and we just have 2 in this one training, and basically what they said and the things that they've learned, and they're not CRIM teachers yet, but they've learned by going through the program, I could tell has changed them. And we have something now we can do, because when you're doing an interview, that you're taking the person back to the crisis, and we have to get the details.
Which can be traumatizing in
Right,
itself.
but now
Yeah.
I know that I can help them with these skills. This is what this man just told me this a few days ago. And I have to think, and he's a law enforcement person. And so, sometimes we can have also misperceptions of people
Mhm.
that are in law enforcement, saying
Yes.
that they're all trying to get us. But there's so many good people in law enforcement. I just really want to say that too, and not to say there haven't been egregious acts by people in law enforcement too,
Right.
but there's so many people in the profession that are really trying to make a difference, to change systems.
Mhm.
And so the Washington State Police Commission is doing that as we speak. And
Good.
so that is something that has the potential, right, to
Mhm.
create
Yes.
systems change, not just change of one person. And I think that's the other thing that I've seen with the community resiliency model. There's another group in New Hanover County, North Carolina, and right after that Hurricane Florence happened, Carrie Sipp from Paces Connection called me. She goes, Elaine, these folks are suffering. Would you do like a 1-hour webinar, just kind of telling them about your skills? I said, okay, I'm there. So,
Yeah.
she set it up, I did it. And so to make a long story short, they now have, I think they have 60 or so community resiliency model certified teachers. It is in every sector of society, but it's not just what they learn. It's not only for recovering from that horrible hurricane that devastated their community, but now they're using it as prevention. So how do we then now put the skills in schools, law enforcement, fire, community service workers, their human resources department for the county? They
Mhm.
actually got an award from the National Association of Counties for their work that they've done with resiliency. And they've done more than,
Beautiful.
of course, the community resiliency model, but that's been one of the core concepts that they've used to build this community. So you're not only talking about, oh yes, immediacy of that Hurricane Florence, they're going to get more hurricanes on the coast there in North Carolina and all those coasts
Yes.
there. But now they're ready.
They're prepared.
They're not going to have
Yeah.
another devastating one like that, but if they do, they are ready to go. And it's not only, hurricanes, right? We
Mhm.
have shootings, we have so many things happening in communities that the skills can be helpful for any of these things. I've responded to many mass shootings, sadly, more than I'd like to mention,
Yeah.
because they keep happening.
Of course.
And I know that if I can help someone settle their nervous system, it doesn't, I guess I want to say too, I don't want to make that, I think the model acknowledges suffering, because I don't want people to think that we don't, because I think you have to lean into suffering and say, oh yes, of course that's there.
Yes.
And if we stay there, then everything that we see in life, we have the lens of it being narrow and
Mhm.
bad and horrible.
Mhm.
But if we widen the lens and say, oh, what else is true? Oh, that's right. There's my granddaughter that I can go for that
Right.
swim with. We were
Let's look at the light. Let's look for the
That's
light.
right. It's like when
Yeah.
you told me about your yoga, right?
Yeah.
That you can go and do yoga, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden you know the light that's inside of you,
Mhm.
and then the light can come forth from you.
Yes.
That to
I
me,
want to ask you
wow.
something.
Yeah,
I don't mean to interrupt, but I didn't want to forget to ask you this.
sure. Go ahead.
So, how do you handle the fact that never would you probably have imagined we would be in a pandemic and all of your research and years of experience? How many people are part of your group, and how do you're doing train the trainers basically, right?
Yeah, so we do train the trainers.
But how
So
many people are you? Like
I
this is
wish I had the exact number. So first of all, we've been doing this now for a number of years. When I first started, it was just like 2 or 3 of us. I mean, it was just a small group. We now have a staff of 12.
okay.
We have a staff of 12, but we also have independent contractors.
But virtual, everybody's all over the
Everybody
world.
right now is virtual. So we
Okay.
used to do it, in terms of what comes from our organization.
Mhm.
There are people that do community resiliency model workshops that do them in person in different parts of the world. And lots of people are doing hybrid. But what happened to us, and this is this is kind of like the golden nugget of COVID-19. And I don't want to say that, not acknowledging all the
You're not
suffering,
an opportunist.
that
Yeah.
lost their lives and,
Yeah.
have long COVID. But I think for us as an organization, in terms of bringing healing to the world, we shifted quickly and learned how to do this online. And it wasn't an easy shift, but we did it.
Right.
'Cause I think I was doubtful in the beginning that we could take a body-centered model that has a lot to do with helping people observe their nervous system online. But I've learned, my God, we can do it. And not only that we learned that we could do it, but we also learned that there were many people around the world that wanted to take our training, but didn't have the means to come to a training because of airfare, housing.
This is so much easier.
It's so much easier. So we've literally had people from India, we've had people from, oh my gosh, Ireland, the UK, parts of Africa. We've had people from so many different parts of the world, Hong Kong. I mean, I'm trying to think of the countries. We have people that are working in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan that could not have come to a training.
Yes.
That are now working with.
You've made it accessible. It's amazing.
So, and that was the whole purpose to begin with, right? Accessibility. But I was probably a naysayer about technology, and I'm no longer. And I think one of the projects that I am so proud about is our project in Ukraine. So I have had a longstanding relationship with Ukrainians through their EdCamp Ukraine, which is an educational organization made up of about 40,000 teachers. And so I spoke at their conference in December, but in 2019, they invited me to come to their launch of a program that includes the community resiliency model skills called C-Learning. So I went to Kharkiv, and so I met so many wonderful Ukrainians that are my colleagues and friends. And when the war started, they said, "Can you help us?" And of course, I said, "Yeah." Of course. And we did 4 webinars on February 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. We translated our basic workshop into Ukrainian that quickly. And we had Ukrainian speakers and translators. And we were able to do that. After the 4 days, they said, "Would you please do daily support meetings for us?" Because they need to continue to hear the skills, and they need to bring you questions of what they're experiencing.
And they need to feel hopeful.
And hopeful. And you know what? They are such hopeful people. They're much more hopeful than I think that I could ever be. They're amazing. I don't know if I would have the courage and the degree of, well-being resiliency that I've seen in myself, but I've certainly learned so much from them. But in the first pretty much 60 days, we had a support meeting every single day. And then we went to 3 days a week. We're now on 2 days a week. And we were going to do a humanitarian community resiliency model teacher training. People pay, to come to our CRIM trainings, but sometimes we do them for no cost, depending on the situation.
Sure.
And so for the humanitarian part of our organization, the Trauma Resource Institute, we are starting, I think it's next week we're starting. Yes, it's next week. We're starting our community resiliency model teacher training for the Ukrainians. So
beautiful.
in fact, I met this morning with our Ukrainian translator from Ukraine, and we were going over the slides and the kind of the last minute things that she's putting together for us. And we will do a teacher training for them. But the questions, and I want to say a little bit about that, because they've been like, I'm so worried about being raped. I'm worried about being tortured. I'm worried for my child.
Of course.
We've had to go to another country and he has no friends. And I'm just worried that he'll never be the same. Or I'm worried about my children because they're playing war. Does this mean that the war will be in them and that they'll never be able to leave this? So we're able to have discussions about these kinds of, I'm going to probably need to write a book, because we have like this.
I would imagine.
Yes, because the questions that we have are so poignant, so meaningful. But I have never in our career responded to a war during the war. I've gone to disasters after. And this is the first time during. And I have to say, it's been remarkable. And I know it's helping, because we have people that come back and say, "Oh, thank you for that. That really did help us." And, we're not doing research, because I wouldn't do research on something like this. It would seem sacrilegious to do that.
Yes.
They keep coming back. And I think the thing that was surprising to me the most was that I think it was after day 37 or so, maybe it was 47, the Alexander Elkin, who's been one of the inspirational leaders of EdCamp, he said, "Elaine, you know that so far there's been 80,000 views of your offerings on our EdCamp Ukraine Facebook page." I mean, I started crying. 80,000.
Of your workshop?
The workshop and the meetings. I mean, they're all, maybe there'll be 1,500 this one, 15, but all together at that point. And it's more now. Yes. I don't know exactly how much it is, but we switched to I think we switched our we switched from Facebook because their Facebook was getting too much traffic. So
Oh,
we had to
you're going to shut down Facebook.
Yeah, we switched to YouTube, I think is what we did.
Okay.
But I think what, again, that golden nugget is for anybody that has an idea that is about healing our populations, our world community, that to think about how social media, as much as we need to have guidelines, as we were talking in the beginning, it also has great opportunities to bring healing to the world.
I agree.
In a positive way. So how do we, kind of mitigate the trauma that it can cause and how do we amplify the healing that can occur and the scalability to large sectors of the population?
Absolutely. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, they can go to the traumaresourceinstitute.com. We have much information on there. They can send a personal message to me through the portal there. They can say, can we please speak to Elaine? And the staff will get me the message. Also, I have, my talk show is on VoiceAmerica, Resiliency Within. And I have a monthly show where I try to highlight the leaders of the world that are doing really good works. And I also interview a lot of authors of interesting books that come my way. I also now am blogging for Psychology Today. So I try to post at least once a month, but I'm going to start, making it, a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I just posted something about, I do think that mental health really is a public health issue, that we need to widen our scope. And I just published that on the 10th of August. So if you look on Psychology Today and put my name in there, you'll see my blog posts that I try to stay up with current affairs and give my ideas about them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for all you're doing. It's incredible and much needed work.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just honored to be here with you. And also, I want to commend you about the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank
And I can't wait to hear more about Care Initiative and what is happening with this. And you're going to have to come, of course, to my show.
I would love to.
So we'll have to figure out a date for you to come and you share what you're doing in the world with children and the arts. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Thank you.